Thank you everyone for joining us today for our Thursday gathering this July 15th. We are really excited to welcome Katie McQuaid back from Back Pocket Resources. This session will be a nice interactive learn, work, love session on creating compelling job descriptions. And we're all really excited to learn what Katie has to say. So I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
My background, Back Pocket Resources, exists to change the way companies hire. We work with small and medium-sized businesses on creating better hiring processes, better internal processes for retention and evaluation of their employees, internally within organizations that perhaps don't have the levels of human resources knowledge internally that a larger organization might have. And we have gone, as with so many other things in the past 2 years, we'll call it, we've gone from a scarcity mindset around candidates where there was very close to full employment and people were really competing to get that talent, to a situation where it's a bit more of a buyer, a seller's market, if you forgive the real estate analogy. We've got a lot of openings and a lot of people who are being very thoughtful and giving weight differently to different considerations within their job searches than they might have done in the past. And I do think that's an evolving situation that will continue to evolve for some time. But my goal here in this webinar today is just to give some ideas for how to approach job descriptions differently. One of the big things that we've noticed, and we touched on it a little bit when we were talking about District Hall looking for interns, is that job descriptions, just even in my lifetime, my professional lifetime, have gone from being 2 lines in a help wanted ad to being these multi-thousand word bulleted lists of every possible experience anyone could ever want, and that seems like it should help all of those details, and in practice what ends up happening is the trees get lost for the forest, right? There's so much that it becomes really hard to tell what exactly the position is, what the central bits of it are. And it becomes challenging both ways. It's hard for companies to evaluate candidates, to understand, like, is this really the right person for this role? And it becomes hard for candidates to understand opportunities. Do I have the skills for this role? Is this actually what I'm interested in doing? Does this make the most sense for me at this point in my career? So I have, like I said, time built in for questions at the end, but I'm also happy to be interrupted at any point if anything I say doesn't make any sense, or if somebody needs some clarification about anything. Okay. So just really quickly, there's going to be these 3 main points, right? The first is just sort of a framework for what an effective job description is, and also what it is not. The second is what sections should you have in your job description? What information do you need to share? What information is superfluous? And all of that good stuff. And then finally, I just want to offer a little bit of guidance for getting the hiring process kicked off. Because even if you have the greatest job description in the world, if you don't have any idea what comes next, it's very likely that you'll miss out on the really great candidates that you want in your organization. So just to start with, creating a compelling job description really begins with an understanding of what you're doing with the job description. Why are you writing this thing, right? And there seems to be a confusion where the quantity of text seems to be standing in for concise writing and clear thinking about what the actual role is, right? If you're hiring a person for a full-time position, even I know a couple of you had mentioned that you're working on intern positions, so maybe not full-time, but the expectation is that someone can grow, that someone can change, particularly if it's a full-time position where you're looking at the span of years. You don't really need to focus that much on every single task that a person might ever do while they're employed in your company, right? That's the course of years, right? some of these job descriptions that you read, they get down to like, may occasionally be asked to change the paper towel roll in the break room when empty. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's just too much detail in here. The lack of limits in the job boards can become a problem. So you want to think about what the key roles, maybe 3 to 5 key responsibilities of this position, the things that this person absolutely needs to be able to do. And you want to think about who you are as a company, right? And we're going to spend a lot of time on this. This is what I mean when I'm talking about the two-way communication. Why would somebody want to work for you, right? And if all you have is salary or benefits, like just put a bag of money on the table and walk away. You don't even need a job description, right? So that's the only reason somebody's working for you. But there are a ton of things that are important to people in their working life, right? We spend way too much time at work for it just to be the paycheck that we get at the end of the week, for most people. You want to think about, the values that you promote, the interactions that your organization has, how you are as a team, how you are as a company. And we're going to get into this, right? I do also like to emphasize that we respond to storytelling. Human beings respond to storytelling, right? We don't think in terms of bulleted lists. I have a bulleted list in front of you right now, and none of you are going to remember it without a screenshot. It's not the way our brains take in and process information, right? Homer didn't write the Iliad as a bulleted list of Achilles' movements through Troy, right? It wouldn't last. You need to tell a story. And so I'll come back to this idea of the job description being a narrative. But when you think about it, think about if your best friend asked you, oh, you're looking to hire? Who are you looking to hire? You would tell a story, right? Oh, we need somebody who can run this function within our company, or who can organize this group of people, or who can add up this column of numbers, or whatever it is, but you would be telling a story about what they're doing, where they'd fall into the organization. And I saw that some comments came through, but I can't really see them from my screen share. Is there anything that I need to?
So far, lots of comments about whether or not it'll be posted. And yes, it will, everybody. It will be posted to our YouTube channel.
Excellent. So when you're looking for someone to come into your organization, right? It's this kind of three-way Venn diagram that you have, right? You want ideal candidate is somebody who is a fit for the organization culturally. They work in a similar way, and they interact in a certain way. They communicate in a certain way. Who also has the skills to do the actual job that they need to do. And also who I wrote loves you back, right? Somebody who wants to be there, that you ideally don't want a candidate who's like, oh, fine, I guess I'll go work for this company. That's not who you want. Now, if you're getting, for example, an intern, right? If they're a good culture fit and they love your organization, but they don't necessarily have all the skills yet, that might be a great person to bring on as an intern and start developing those skills for them. Same thing, right? If they're a good culture fit and they have the skills, but they're kind of on the fence about you, they're a potential candidate, but they might not be the one that you want to hire, right? If you're looking to shake up your organization and really change it, maybe you want to bring in someone who cares deeply about your organization and has the skills that you need, but who is not a culture fit, right? If you need to change the culture within your organization, you want somebody who falls outside of that, a change agent, right? But for most of the time when we're talking about writing a job description, we're looking for that ideal, the person who is a culture fit, who has the skills, and who cares about the organization, right? And in order to find that person, you need to be able to tell them who you are, what you need done, and why it's right for them, right? Otherwise, somebody can't identify if they're that ideal candidate, right? So the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, it's not a silver bullet, right? I can't say that if you follow my advice, you are never going to have the, extra applications for people that you look at their application, their resume, and you go, why did they even apply for this job? They have none of the skills that we're looking for. It's too easy to just click apply on the job boards. And so we see that a lot. But you by taking the time up front and developing a job description in a way that both you and the candidates can better understand it, you are more likely to be able to identify and attract the people that you're looking for. So the job description sections are the first step that you need to take, right? And some of this stuff becomes it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie, right? If your company, if your organization hasn't looked at who you are, or if that's changed as a result of all the other changes that have happened in the world, um, whatever you say on your website for who you are as an organization, that may not be accurate anymore. I don't want you to repeat the language that's on your website unless it's up to the minute and accurate. You're assuming that anyone who's serious about working for your company is going to look at your website. They're going to look at the public facing discussion that you've had about who you are as an organization, what your values are, what you're seeking to do in your industry. You need to put it together in a way that it can be very concise, right? Who are you? What is the lived experience of the people who work in this organization? Not just what do we aspire to, but what is it actually like? Okay. And there's always this hesitation when I say that. Companies say, but we want to paint ourselves in the best light. Of course you do. But you need to make it accurate, right? You need to make sure that whatever you're saying is reflective of what someone is going to experience if they come to work for you. And the reason for that is people will just leave if you're sharing information that's not accurate. If you're saying, oh, we're a very collaborative work environment, and you are in fact not, someone who's looking for a collaborative work environment is not going to stay with you or is not going to thrive in the role in a more competitive environment. Someone who wants a more competitive environment is going to feel hamstrung by a really collaborative environment. You have to find the right personality types, the right work styles for your company as it actually is, not just as you think you want it to be. So the third point there, that was kind of the first and second point. The third point there about defining the ideal results of this hire, think of it as the hiring hypothesis, right? And if you remember from 7th grade science, right? If we hire this person, then the company will change in such a way, right? If we hire for this role, then it may just be we have increased capacity to serve our customers, right? For certain roles. It might be if we hire for this role, we will bring in expertise in a new product or service area that we don't have currently on the team. If we bring in this position, then we will be able to grow the company in X, Y, or Z way. Right? But you want to think about what the results are of the hire, not just, oh, we need a person. Okay. This is especially true if you're, we call it hiring to replace, right? Somebody retired, they moved on, and you need to replace them. You're not actually replacing the person who was there. Some of their job functions will need to be taken over by a new person, right? But you don't necessarily need to have a clone of the person who sat in that seat. Your company is different than when you hired that person. Maybe it is the right time to think about what the next steps are for that role and what capacities, what skills, what traits you need to bring in order to get to the next sort of iteration of your company. And then the fourth point is what do we have to offer? Obviously, salary and benefits, parking spots, vacation time, flexible working schedules, all of that stuff factors into that, but also leadership opportunities, mentorship. Do they have the opportunity to take courses, or do you have a professional development system in place, right? So there's lots of different things that people can get from the place that they work, right? It's not just compensation. But you want to define the pieces of the job description separately so that a clear story can be told about this position, but also so that you can reuse other pieces of it for other roles. If you're hiring for more than one position over the next few months, there's no reason for you to go and re-articulate the company history and culture. You have that, and you can just pluck that out and sort of put it into the next job description. In all job descriptions, you want to have a discussion of your company history, right? A description of who you are, what the company does, and where it's going. You want to have a talk about your culture and values, right? What is important to the company? How do you treat each other? How do you treat your clients? How do you treat the environment? Those things are very important attractants in finding great employees, right? People want to be a part of an organization that does more than just makes widgets, right? But that makes widgets and donates 10% of their widgets to widgetless resources, right? And then who do you want to work with, right? What traits, what personalities, what do you look for in your colleagues, right? And how do you expect them to show up each day? Okay. I hesitated before I put this next slide in. The next slide is a job description that we used in Back Pocket Resources. And I went back and forth on this because it's putting it in when I'm sitting here as the expert on job descriptions gives it credence as the only way to do it, but that is not true. Okay, this was what was right for us for this particular role. It does have the elements that I'm talking about, but it may not be precisely the layout or the sections the way that you want to do it for your company. So yes, this is right for us. It is potentially not right for everyone at all times. So this was for a recruiter position, which in our company is the entry level. That is the people that call up the candidates and screen them against the job orders that we have for staffing contract positions. Right? And so we started out with who we are, right? Who's Back Pocket Resources? What's our history? Where do we come from? Where are we approaching this from? We go into who we're looking for, right? And again, it's a story. We want someone who's going to provide an amazing experience to potential candidates and take pride in what we do, right? There's information about what sorts of technologies they would need to understand and what sorts of traits that we need them to have. There's also a little bit of information about how they're being evaluated, right? They're accountable to their weekly metrics. They need to use phone, email, job boards, all of that good stuff. Then we put in, this is something that's really worked well for us with the recruiter position because it is an entry-level position, and this does work for internships too. We talked about what personality traits we really needed to attract. What did we want to have in this role? And then we literally just gave a list of words that describe that person, right? Because there's not a ton for this role of, specific work experience or specific software tools that they need or specific certifications or anything like that. We talked a lot more about personality, right? We needed someone who's punctual, responsible, respectful, excellence, positive integrity, right? Those things are very important in that role. And so we put those in there. What qualifications they have, and then what they're offering, what we're offering as compensation. Okay. That is not a bad way to approach an entry-level job, right? As a story. What I will tell you is that you will get fewer candidates this way because a lot of people who are in a job search will set up trickle feeds in the job boards in Indeed or LinkedIn or Monster or whatever they're using. And they'll be looking for specific keywords. And if those keywords match or a couple of the keywords match, they'll automatically apply. we very intentionally took a lot of the keywords out and used phrases rather than specific words because we didn't want to be buried under 500 semi-interested candidates. We wanted to receive a dozen interested candidates. And that it's a way to preserve our own, I guess, resources, time and effort as we're doing that. Is that making sense? I can't see anyone's faces, so I only have a single screen today. It's really, really difficult this way. All right, so unless I get interrupted, I'm gonna keep going.
Do you want us to be telling you some of the comments? Do you want us?
If there's something that I should be responding to, 100%, yeah.
Well, Diana just said, so glad to see companies normalizing putting the base salary in the job description instead of leaving candidates to go through the multiple rounds of interviews before finding out the pay isn't feasible for them to live off. Agree 100%, Diana.
Yeah, and I caution, just to piggyback off of that, I do think that the salaries should be listed. I do think, I caution against putting a range. And the reason that I caution against putting a range is that, you know, so in this case, you know, the salary is $30,000. If I put a range that said, you know, $25,000 to $35,000, every single candidate there would want $35,000. If I put it as $30,000 and I meet someone who absolutely blows my hair back and I'm talking with them about whether or not they accept this role, I have some wiggle room. I can throw an extra $5,000 at them because I know that that's part of my range, right? Similarly, if I have a candidate who, you know, I'm on the fence about, I'm not so sure, I probably wouldn't hire them anyway, but, you know, that may be someone that, you know, someone who's looking to earn $30,000 is not going to care that the bottom of the range is $25,000, right? So I caution against a lot of the dance. I think that if you're trying to build a trust relationship with somebody who is going to be your colleague, then you just show up as your authentic self. There's no reason to start playing games during the hiring process. You're not guaranteeing every person who reads the job description is going to earn X number of dollars from your company, right? They haven't gotten the job yet. But if you're going to pay that money, you should just be ready to pay that money. I hope that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's great advice.
All right, good. So I am a very visual thinker. I draw pictures on things and I have arrows going from one thing to another. So this works really well for me. There may be another way of managing this information for other people. I know there's a ton of creative people on, on this call right now. And so feel free to visualize this information in any way. But the important thing to understand is that skills, competencies, traits, technologies, those can all be developed over the course of an employee's tenure with your company. Presumably, you're looking for someone who's going to spend years with your organization. And so there are things that you expect them to learn and develop and grow over that time, right? And some of that's the world that we live in, right? There are tools and technologies that I use daily now that were not a part of. I never once got on a Zoom until a year ago, March, right? I had always done WebEx or something else, right? Now I speak Zoom like a second language. So you're expecting that people are going to pick up new things while they're working with you, either because of a global pandemic or because of, you know, just the normal, you know, new technologies or new job or business opportunities, different approaches to things, right? Bringing someone into your organization should change your organization. That doesn't mean it needs to chuck the baby out with the bathwater and throw away everything that you've ever built, but each new person in your organization should expand the organization in some direction or another. But when you're hiring, there are certain skills, traits, experiences, communication competencies, whatever, that everybody has to have on day one. So what I would do with this grid is I would literally fill in like, okay, what are the skills that I need this person to have for this particular role the day that they walk into my company, right? Is there a certain technology. And so some of this depends on your industry, right? If I'm running a dentist's office and I'm trying to hire a medical biller, right? I need somebody who understands medical billing codes. Day one, I don't have the time to train them on that. I can give them certain guidance on, particular code numbers, right? But they need to understand how that works day one. There are other skills that are sort of like, they're nice to have, but you could develop them, right? If somebody has some small amount of knowledge about something, but should have more to really do this job well, okay, that might be something that can be in that second column, right? What do they, it's that sort of cherry on top, right? If I find someone who has this, that would be great. And then that last column is nice to have, right? I don't really need it to be part of this job, but the person that this position replaces was really great at team building activities and would help us to develop the idea for how we would come together as a company and how we would bond with each other and help to make a really great organization even better. It would be really great if I could find somebody else who really has that interest in creating opportunities for us to come together as a group. Really not strictly part of this job description, but it's really a gap that we have in our organization right now, and we could use to bring that in. Does that make sense? Same thing for everything else, right? Communications must have on day one. They need to know how to email in a way that has, proper grammar and everything else, but maybe they don't need to know how to write a press release on day one. We'll coach that through, right? Those sorts of things going on, right? Remember that a lot of skills are transferable. A lot of times we see companies, hopefully not so much anymore. I haven't been seeing it as much lately, but when, 2 years ago when we had, when it was more of a buyer's market, we saw companies where they would keep a position open for literally months because they couldn't find someone who had their particular, database system experience. And it's like, well, you could train someone to use that in 2 weeks if they had some other database system. Why'd you keep this job open for 2 months, keeping your whole staff stretched thin and losing their minds? Anyway, particular pet peeve, right? Remember that many things are trainable. I left boxes at the bottom so I can add in other things that are specific to specific roles. Create whatever works for you, but understand which things are wants versus which things are needs. Okay. And so then I love that funnel system, right? Where is, I borrowed the concept of minimal viable candidate from the software industry. They have a minimal viable product, right? What is the least complete thing that we can ship out and start selling? So a minimal viable candidate is, what is the trait that they can have least well developed and still functionally do this job? So for example, on the side, I have from the recruiter job description that I had a few slides back, right? It is very easy for us to find people who have basic phone skills, basic typing skills, right? That is a huge pool of people, right? Slightly smaller pool of people are people who have those skills, the phone and typing skills, but also have the behavior, right? The willingness to just keep getting on the phone over and over again. The people that will meet the metrics that we've set out for them. So whatever number of dials, whatever number of candidates, whatever the metric is. Slightly fewer people have those previous skills plus also the communication. And then for us, it really got down to the values of integrity, because we would ruin relationships, multi-year relationships with clients if somebody tried to be shady. So that had to be the full stop, right? If they did not have that, they're out, right? The better you understand how important each trait in your job description is, each skill in your job description is, the easier it's going to be for you to say, okay, you know what, this stuff is pretty easy to find, but where's really, like, if I don't have this, I can't hire this person, even if they've got all the other stuff. There's got to be a minimal a minimal level of competency with each of the things that you have said are important, or that trait is not important, right? You have fluff in your job description if it's not actually important enough to be exclusionary for someone who doesn't have it. Yes? I think so. Okay. If you are like a solopreneur or startup, you are making the decision by yourself, all of the assessment needs to be done by you, right? If you are working with a team where maybe you have someone doing the initial phone screen, somebody else or a couple of people are doing an interview or a panel interview, somebody else is checking references or following up with previous employers, things like that. When you find out what you need, right? When you really know what you need, it's easy to figure out how to find it, okay? If you are looking for an alignment with your company cultures and values, or let's go technical. We haven't talked about a whole bunch of technical skills yet, right? So tools, abilities, certifications, licenses. Some industries, this really matters, right? If they don't have the proper certification, they can't do the work. We don't want unlicensed nurses. We don't want unlicensed teachers, right? Like those are industries where you need to have a particular certification or license. That's pretty easy to find out, but who's reviewing it? Because you hear stories all the time about people who snuck through, who didn't actually have things. It's a little blurrier for a lot of other companies where the tools or the abilities are concerned. Those can be everything from like actual mechanical tools of the trade to software tools to conceptual tools, right? How are you creating a marketing campaign? Whatever the tool is that you need this person to be able to do, that this position needs to be able to do. So are you reviewing their portfolio or their past work? Do they have writing samples? Do they just do a demonstration for you? You give them a coding challenge or something like that. If it's a software, do you just put the physical tool in their hand if they're supposed to be able to operate some piece of machinery? Do you give them scenarios to understand what their technical skills are and how they would approach a problem? There's no right answer. It's got to be right for your company, for your industry, for this particular role that you're hiring for, right? You want to have a process that you use for all hiring, but it does not need to be the exact same process for every role within your organization. Yeah. So before you start posting jobs and looking for people, who in the process is going to be looking for each of the competencies that you decided were the most important in this position, and how are they looking for it? Where are they looking for it? What is going to happen so that you'll know when you can say, oh yes, we said X is important and candidate Y demonstrated it in this, and this way. Because if you cannot say that, you're getting fuzzy about what you said you need. And when you get fuzzy about what you said you need, you end up with misalignments. You end up saying like, oh, there's this nice boy with bright eyes who came in and interviewed well, and he seemed really positive, and let's give him a chance. I think he can do the job. And it's not based in any sort of hard fact. There's no metric behind it. There's no reason to believe that person can do the job. Again, going back to that first Venn diagram, if you're looking for an intern, that might be the right way to approach it, right? The nice boy with bright eyes might be a lovely intern and you can help build the skills. But if you're looking for an ideal candidate, somebody who's going to come in and obviously with some training and some support, entering your organization, be able to be a productive employee, that person needs to come to the table with some pre-developed skills and competencies. The last is just sort of a checklist, and I know we're sort of bumping up against the time, and I promised everyone that we would have time to talk and ask questions and things like that. But before you even start the hiring process, you should know salary, benefits, anything that you can add into the negotiations. You don't even have to have all of these out on the table at first, right? But what things are negotiable? What things do you offer? What do your current employees really like about working for your organization? What's something that really resonates with them? Hey, ask them, right? They may say, oh, I've never worked at a company before where the leadership is so supportive of my family responsibilities. Cool. You should know that because you may not realize how supportive you are relative to other people or other leaders. I don't know if you guys watched The Queen's Gambit, but I started thinking about everything in that chessboard view, you know, where she like sees it up on the screen and the whole chess pieces are moving around. It's bird's eye view, chessboard view, whatever. Where does this position fit within your existing organization? Who are they reporting to? Who's reporting to them? Where does that work? How does that tie into other people? And are all those stakeholders part of this process? Are they identifying what is really necessary in the new hire? What is your onboarding plan? Who's training this person? Onboarding is not orientation. Orientation is like, hey, the bathroom's over there, the break room's over there. That is done in 15 minutes. No big deal. Onboarding is bringing people up to speed with who your company is, what the clients are, what the projects look like, how you approach problems, how you plan to grow in the future. It's a much more involved thing. And it can be anything from, you know, a few days to a week for an entry-level employee, all the way up to 6 months or a year for a management or senior level director, because there's just so much to know. It needs support. So who's going to be supporting that, and what comes off their plate in order to allow them to do that? Are there any threats to this hire, right? We are planning to hire for this person unless we lose this big contract to do X, Y, or Z. Are there any triggers for increased urgency? We have RFPs out for 5 different jobs, and if 3 of those land, holy heck, we need to have someone in that seat already. What's the cadence and timing for your hiring process, and who's responsible for it, right? So we anticipate posting on this date. Within 2 weeks, we anticipate reaching out to those first applicants and scheduling interviews. 2 weeks from that, we hope to have conducted the first round of interviews and moved on to the second interviews. Whatever the timing works for you, know it, because it ends up, when companies are hiring, they're usually already frantic. They already need more help, right? We don't hire when we're kind of like, twiddling my thumbs, maybe I'll go on vacation. Hey, should I cut out early today? We hire when we're like hair on fire. Holy heck, we can't do all this work, right? It's just human nature. It's a huge financial commitment, and it's a huge time commitment. So we tend to put it off until it's almost too late, or definitely too late. We want to think about where the job is going to be posted, who's responsible for each step of a process, right? Actual name of person who is going to be shepherding it through each step of the process, so that it doesn't just sort of be like, oh, did you call? Oh, I thought I was gonna, when am I supposed to call? The last one, I didn't have enough time to really dig into it today, but there's the missing piece of our puzzle, right? What exists or doesn't exist in your organization right now that you really need, right? Do you really need somebody who profoundly understands social media and can help you to make your presence more publicly known? Do you really need somebody who can help diffuse conflicts between team members because communications are really weak and could use some support and coaching? Do you really need someone who has tax auditing and compliance knowledge, who can help bring your books in order? Whatever the thing is that's missing in your organization, that should be a thing that everyone is looking for as you're making this hire.
Now's your time, folks. If you want to unmute and ask your questions, feel free to do so. And I'm just changing my view so I can see all of you. I do ask that if you do unmute and ask questions, please turn your cameras on.
Oh, well, I just had that last question in the chat with regards to the number of applications notices I've been getting for what you call jobs. Like I said, project manager, electricians, energy analysis, RNs, and what have you, because of my work or experience that I put in my resume. But looking at the prerequisites, it says, oh, you need a degree, you need X amount of years of experience. Is the company that is actually listing or putting the notice to me or putting it out with me included, allowing for me to just try, or is it just a thing that the bots do on their hiring perspectives?
Yeah, usually it's the bots on the jobs boards. it's worth, if you see something where you believe you have the experience with the company, what I would say is go on LinkedIn and see if any of your contacts are also also work at that company or friends of friends. It's a great way to leverage in your network. And then you say to them, hey, Amy, I saw this really interesting job that your company posted. I don't have the prerequisite education, so I don't want it just to go in front of a bot because the bot will kick me out. But I have X number of years of experience and I know that I have the competencies to do this work. And I'd love to talk with a person about how I can demonstrate those competencies. But yeah, if you just click the apply button, unfortunately, it generally goes to a CRM, an applicant tracking system that will just kick you out. And, oh, he doesn't have it. And it never gets in front of a person. So you sort of have to look for those workarounds to get in front of a human, because humans can exercise judgment and computers can't.
Okay, thanks.
John here. First, I want to say I thought this was delightful. I think you've really thought through how like this whole process works in a way that I don't think most people apply. So I think that that's great. My question is more about what about the process of like co-creating roles? So one thing I find is like, especially if like you have a really fast growing organization or it's a more senior level position, like, you're hiring like a COO, for example, it's often not like there's this cut and dried, like, here's the 15 things I need and that kind of thing. And it's often like talking to people and like figuring like, okay, how does this person complement me and fit with my skills? I guess, how do you think about sort of, it's a bit more, I think entry level, you should apply this. At the COO, when you're like being like, how does this person fit with my personality? It feels like it's more of a co-creation process.
It is
How do you think
definitely
about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a co-creation process. We just worked with a client for a month and a half developing the job description for a managing director. It
Mhm.
is not, when I tell you you're putting work in on this, you're putting work in on this. You have to talk to the stakeholders. You have to really understand. And so, I had to go very quickly in this, but
Mhm.
who is this person interacting with? What are their personalities? How do they work? And how is this person going to fit in order to make this organization function at its best, right? And therefore, what traits do we need to find for that? It is a really slow process, and I would highly recommend being as collaborative as possible with sort of everyone who touches it, including people that will be supervised by
Mhm.
the COO, right, who will be reporting to them.
Yeah, well, I was even thinking like I completely agree. Within the organization, there should be collaboration. I was also wondering like, what about collaborating with the candidate? Because like, I feel like in certain ways you don't find like a perfect person, but it's like you find like you think about, it's like, or like when you're assembling your top team, right? It's like you kind of fit, like you have a bunch of like not necessarily perfect puzzle pieces, and you're
Mhm.
figuring like how do these things fit together.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting model, co-creating with the candidate about, where their strengths and interests are and how that meshes with the strengths and interests. Because if everybody at that top level is willing to shift their responsibility, shift what they're doing, that could actually make a really interesting opportunity for everyone to take on some new growth and some new responsibilities within the organization in a
mhm.
way that all the strengths are being complemented really nicely. That would involve a lot of trust. You would need to have an organization where the leadership really trusts each other, um,
Mhm.
in order to feel safe enough to not turf battle that out.
Yeah, yes, of course, that's a necessary prerequisite. That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, John, for the great question and conversation. Thank you, Katie.